Sorry, I was running late.
That's not a problem at all, Barry.
No problem. Hi.
We're grateful to be able to have some time with you, Barry. So don't
No problem
apologise
at
at
all.
all. Have you have you, have you got a drink, Barry? All settled?
Yep,
Yeah.
I'm all settled, ready to go. So that's
Oh,
good.
brilliant. Okay, I think I've put on the record thing, Barry. If that's okay.
Yep.
So
Oh,
hi. Oh, sorry, Barry. Hi, it's Joe. I'm just
hi,
gonna
Joe.
love you guys and leave you. I've got a band practice, so
No
I
problem.
enjoy
Enjoy.
the evening. I'll see you later.
Thank you.
Take
Pleasure.
care. Enjoy, Joe.
Yeah. So have you pressed record?
Yep.
Oh yeah. Well done. Good job.
Joe is in a little band, Barry. Great thing
Okay.
for your well-being, I think, having something kind of a bit of a creative expression.
Lovely.
Barry,
Good.
can I just preface this by saying,
Yeah.
and it is interesting because I just kind of like touched base with this person before, that the person who's now the chief executive officer for WellSouth, the Southland Health Board,
Yeah.
is a guy, lovely man by the name of Andrew Swanson Dodds.
Yeah.
He was.
I know Andrew.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Well, the reason why he was my neighbour throughout my entire from about the age of 8 to his mother
Oh.
still lives next door to
Oh,
a family
wow.
home.
Oh, that.
But Barry, I was going to say, I remember in 1999, I
Mm.
was a recently graduated social worker working as a probation officer in Rotorua.
Oh, right.
And I just bumped into Andrew and I said, "Oh, Andrew, I'm off for a training," because he was working in Rotorua at the time,
Yeah.
working in CAMS, I think. And he said, "If you're going to see Barry Taylor," he said,
Yeah.
he said, top of his field. He said, "You're going to be talking to someone who's at the." And I remember it clearly. I remember going in and I remember being absolutely riveted by your presentation.
Oh, well, thank you. That's wonderful. That's great to hear. Yeah,
And,
it's been a long time. 38 years I've been working in the field now. So,
oh.
yeah.
Barry, can I ask, how did you get into that particular space?
Well, it was in the mid 80s when we started to become aware of well, there were some media reports about young people killing themselves. Um, and so what happened was I was very much involved in the National Youth Council, which was like the peak body for the youth sector in this country at that time. And so we started to become a bit concerned, and we went and connections with connections, and then there was a documentary about it by one of the Bryant. He did several documentaries, and one was on youth suicide. And so out of that, we went into the last. There was some money left over from one of those telethons. It was the child health one. It was one of the last ones. So we sort of went to them with this proposal saying is we wanted to address youth suicide. And anyway, we got the money, the end of the money, and it all started from there back in 1988, and I've been going ever since. So yeah.
Well, because there was at that point too. I remember near Bulls. I'm from the Bay of Plenty, but I remember there'd been a cluster. So there'd been a couple of.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what had happened. That's what had started to build people's attention around this, and yeah. So it's interesting to note that that generational cluster, the Generation X's, are still killing themselves. That is, the men in that group are now in their 40s, 50s, and are still killing themselves. So it's as it were, as they have aged, the suicide rates age. So yeah.
It's well, it's I always describe it, especially to the new graduates and the new students. It's a field where if you're going to be practicing as a social worker or someone in the health professions, especially anywhere, you need to be able to be competent to ask the question and to be able to signpost someone to the right place and walking them with them through that stage. There is a question that we kind of like to kind of explore is, what do you think is what advice would you give a newly qualified? I say social worker. That's obviously the key group we're working with. But what advice do you have in relation to your space?
I always say there's three things. Is one is trust your intuition. If you feel something's not right or something's not sitting right, then don't be hesitant to ask further questions. I think that's really important. The other thing is when you do ask questions, be alert not to what people just say, but how they react, what's going on for them. And also, I think as good social workers is think about what are the stressors, not just the distressors, because it's attending to the stresses that we want to try and prevent things becoming distresses in people's lives. Yeah.
Good advice. Because that's your strong kaupapa is about creating wellness rather than focusing on the
well-being is far more important. Or as I keep saying, suicide prevention isn't about stopping people killing themselves. It's inviting people to live. And so therefore, what does it mean to live is the key question.
What do you see? How is New Zealand at the moment placed in relation to that, in your view, Barry? I mean, as someone with a vast experience, what's your thoughts about it at the moment?
We well, I think one of the biggest challenges is our suicide rate isn't going down. In some age clusters, it's staying about the same, but it isn't going down. So for me, a big question is, well, why do we keep doing the same sort of things if we're not really making the difference? And so I think that's a real challenge for us. It is very difficult when we are not attending to those social determinants about people's well-being, and that people are facing more pressures. And also, when we look at it, we're not attending to things like family harm, sexual harm, particularly in children. As I often say, what is the greatest gift we can give our tamariki? It's attachment, it's attachment, it's attachment, And they are the things that I think we're not attending to enough in people's lives.
And that's a good, trying to think of the aspects of as social workers or anybody in the help profession, whilst it's the work we sometimes do is one-to-one, having a strong philosophy about working at a structural level to get the change and maybe the resource in the right place is so important, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
What's the international scene like, Barry, and comparatively?
The international scene is the suicide rates are high in many countries. Once again, we're not seeing significant decreases anywhere. We're not, but then again, that's the problem with prevention. We don't know. With prevention, it's very hard to prove that you're being effective in prevention. And maybe the indicators are that this rates aren't going up as high as they have been in the past. There are lots and lots. I think the biggest thing is, both in New Zealand here, is we now know a lot more about suicide and why people become suicidal. And I think that's really important. The challenge is then what do we do with that knowledge in a way that's useful for people's practice?
How have we obtained that information, Barry?
Well, I think we over the years we've accumulated that some through research, although we're not strong on research in this country, or as strong as we could be, but very much so as there is so much work being done around young researchers, promoting suicide as an area for research. And so, for instance, in Australia, the work that's been done on men and suicide, like through Movember. We know more about men's issues and their the barriers for them seeking help because of Movember than we have through any other government funding. But these things have all lead us to a greater insight about them. Well, what is it that we're trying to achieve, and what are the things that are most useful? So for men, rather than saying is men, men need to talk or men need to do that, what we found is that it needs to be permission giving, like men can talk. And by saying that, men then have a choice in that, rather than sort of nagging them to say that this is what they need to do, as we say, well, actually, you can talk about these heavy, very strong emotions. Yeah. So that's
I used to be involved with the non-violence program in New Zealand for a few years. I was involved in running the program and involved in various aspects of it. And when we looked at the social, cultural, and historical factors about why men in particular aren't able to express their emotions, it was quite a very insightful opportunity to go back into some historical events, the views that we had in both World War I and World War II when you came back, rather than talking about it, drinking it away and all those various other factors. Is that something which you would agree with, Barry?
Absolutely. So when you look at my father's generation, he was born, after World War I, but his father was. So you've got the first half of the last century very much characterized what it was to be a man. So you had 2 wars, then they came back, didn't talk about it, and it was that it's that sense of being staunch or being strong. I have to be strong, and if I can't be strong. What's interesting, of course, is there's been a change, like a lot more men are saying is, I don't want to be the absent dad. I want to be involved in my children's lives. But what we're also seeing is in young men is this backlash, like these Alan Tate, sort of Andrew Tate kind of approaches that are really quite scary. And in fact, there was a very interesting documentary I just watched on Netflix last week on the manosphere. And
Louis Theroux.
Yeah, and it was very fascinating. Look, I thought that really tells us a lot about these messages that young men are getting. And once again, it's been the absence of positive role models in men, and the absence of dads particularly, that a lot of these men have been looking for these other men to give them a sense of mana or a sense of dignity as men.
And you could really see by the interactions that those young guys had where they're walking around, people that are flocking to them. They were just, it was very, very interesting. And the whole kind of incel movement, kind of that, which, wasn't a word known to me, certainly maybe 5 years ago, or it's certainly kind of an evolving space. And of course, we've never had communications like we have now too, this ability
that's the thing. And so, where do young men find positive messages of men? Like in the past, you went and worked, but you may have worked at the freezing works or at the railways or whatever, and older men became your mentors. But they also put you in your place at times when you needed to. But see, all that's gone, all that infrastructure. And so when you've got these sort of insular cells of where people are hearing these messages, then where are we offering? The only opportunities we've got so far is at school, but that can be very difficult. We're finding, the increase in women teachers, experiencing misogyny, disrespect, and that by these young men is a worrying sort of trend that we're seeing.
Yeah, it's so true. It's and that's why, gosh, the value of male teachers in primary school too. just on a side, last month, Barry, I had a school reunion for due to a male teacher from my primary school who reached out and said, would we like to have a bit of a reunion? When I reached out to my fellow classmates about this particular man, Mr. Brian Miller from Greerton School from the 1970s, I was flooded with people so keen to get involved, and the conversations that flowed through in relation to the role model that he had been, the kind of like the influence he had, and it was incredibly I'd say not heartwarming. It was very impressive and it just demonstrated the impact that you can have at that age.
Well, it's interesting sometimes when I've been invited to speak with staff at schools, one of the issues that come up more and more, particularly in like smaller communities, is teachers who may have had a student, but the student's left school, but now the student through sport or maybe just seeing it at the local shops are reaching out to these teachers that they did have a relationship, seeking advice, seeking sort of, well, what do I do? And the teacher saying, well, I don't know if this is ethical or not, but like there's no one in this person's lives when these kids have got lots of trouble. And I think that's our real tragedy for a lot of young men.
There's no question about it that teachers are frontline social workers who have such an incredible job anyway, and they give them all the holidays and all the pay they can jolly well get, I say, Barry. I think COVID certainly reminded us to appreciate teachers in a far greater way, and
Well, I have a sister who she just recently died, but she was a teacher for years in lower decile schools with Māori and Pacific boys. And she used to say, give me a teacher now, an extra teacher, and I'll save you a prison warden and a social worker later in life. And I think that's true. Because I often say, as part of well men are literate and numerate men. Like I've had men literally crying after being able to read to their child a story, bedtime story, which they'd never had in their lives. Things
so
like
powerful to be able to do that, and the role modeling by somebody showing if the dad's interested in reading a book, how that just permeates through. Plus, I'm a huge fan of Christopher Hitchens. Barry's an English writer that passed away maybe 11 years ago now, 14 years ago, and one of the key things he said when asked for what advice he would give to young professionals or young journalists in particular, he said to read the classics. The wealth that we can get from that is just incredible. But if you are hesitant or can't delve into that space, it's
absolutely. And also, like when we look at young people getting caught up in the juvenile justice system, it's usually things by not having their license, not being numerate and such like. So if we could do that, we could be actually cutting back some of their encounters with police and such like.
I think everybody should leave secondary school with a driver's license, at least the learner's license, and a first aid certificate, but like the Scandinavians' approach to it, and a bit more skill and more skills in relation to communication and the basics of relationships, I think.
That's right. Yeah.
Rather than having to wait to receive a protection order and having to do it through a non-violence program. Yeah. And often it was very humbling to see people standing in front of a board which might have the word, what is a healthy relationship, and shaking their head and realizing that they've never either seen or experienced what is a healthy relationship.
Yeah. Well, even in my workshop from sad blokes to well men, I do a very quick exercise where people just quickly, not allowed to think about it. If a younger man came to them and said, what is it to be a well man? What would you say? And people really struggle with that. Like, we can tell you what unwell men are like, but what does it mean to be a well man? And I think that's part of our problem, is we don't know how to answer that question properly.
Barry, give us a plug about what you're up to at the moment and how people, because one of the things, especially through Joe's been a very proactive in management roles in different social sectors. So very people that she's connected to are involved with that. How do they? What do you do, and how can they access it?
Over the years, of course, as I suppose as you expect, perspectives change. And so when I was overseas for a long time, and when I came back, I realized that I needed to, establish myself again. And so what I thought about, I looked at a lot of the training programs and decided that where the real gap is at that more advanced level. So there's lots of 101 or foundation or gatekeeper type training. And yet when we look at what coroners are saying and such like, they're saying is, given now the prevalence of suicide in our community, it is not unreasonable, as you were saying at the start, that for someone working in the helping professions, that you will come across someone who has varying degrees of suicidality. And therefore, suicide prevention training should be something that's part of your ongoing professional development. Like can't just say, I did a course 7 years ago, I've ticked that box, because it's dynamic, it's changing.
Good.
Secondly, I've been very much about what we need to do is your training needs to be commensurate or equal to your scope of practice. So, so if you're at level 6 or above, like you've got a master's or a bachelor's degree, therefore your training should be commensurate to that. So I've been really pitching my training at that much more advanced level. The other thing that I think has been really interesting in suicide prevention is over the last 10 years, but particularly in the last sort of 4 to 5 years, there is a growing consensus internationally that most of these suicide screening tools that we use are useless. Like what they say is, all they tell you is this person has been exposed to a number of risk factors, but it does not help you to predict suicidality. And so what they've been developing, in fact, in England, they've come out with a guidance saying not to use these tools. They are so inaccurate.
Wow.
And so what they've been talking about is a more person-centered approach. So a lot of my training is saying is throw out all those kind of tools and think about what does a person-centered look. So rather than looking at, is this person got low, medium, or high risk, I talk about where are they on the continuum of suicidality, from no suicidality to someone who's having thoughts, to someone now who's regularly engaging in behavior. Sort of like there's a continuum, and that's far more useful. And also answering the question is, when they have those thoughts, does what I call their trip switch go off? Does it say, yes, I could do it, but I won't? And what we want to do is to instill in people a strong trip switch. So when those thoughts come into their head, so my training is quite a different emphasis now on that, but also looking at a well-being. And then I do a 2-day course. The second day is what I've developed is what I call is it a model? Well, it's a way of I call about compassionate change making. So what does change look like for a suicidal person? And then what I call custodian of hope outcomes. So once again, it's not like a model, but it's saying, looking at all the research, these are the kind of outcomes, clinical or social work or therapeutic acts that are useful. And so we look at, so the more you can focus on how do I help to achieve these, the more successful you can be. And the person delaying, what I talk about, it's delaying the suicidal thought and interrupting the suicidal thought and disrupting the suicidal thinking. And my other big area is moving away from safety plans, because safety plans are nebulous. to something that's similar, but there's a lot more research and people saying have a lot more sort of currency, and that's the notion of a coping plan. So I leave the session with a plan of a notion that I can cope, that I've got things, I am a resourceful person, which is a bit better than, what keeps me safe, because what does safety can be so nebulous anyway. Yeah, so that's where I'm trying to spread the word at the moment.
Well, I hope, all power to you, Barry. The reality too, though, Barry, is the fact the names are so important, isn't it? And the rephrasing that to how am I coping? That's rather than how am I safe? Because you literally, as you said, what does that mean? And and there's so many different levels and different, but how do I cope? And that's also, I always say that nobody knows why one person can go through one ordeal and respond one way. Why resilience? How is resilience built, established, or even maintained?
That's right.
And it's and if we were able to determine it, it would be an incredible breakthrough for so many different spaces and fields.
Yeah.
And Barry, are you doing your courses throughout the length of the
I am around the country this year, although it's a challenging time. Like training is not people's priority at the moment, and it is very difficult. So but there's enough work, but so that's
Barry,
good.
As I was talking to Joe and various things too about, how you see a movie star will make a few movies and they'll go back to the university from his where he lived, and they'll give him an honorary doctorate for that, and all rest. He got about 10 tries in his season, so they give it. Barry, I don't want to speak this out without it happening, but I would never be surprised, and I'd just be absolutely delighted if you were given an honorary doctorate for all of the work that you've done. You think about the energy and time that you have put into the subject, superseding any form of doctorate or postdoc work you could ever likely to have.
Well, that's very kind to say, because one of the things that I've come to have an understanding myself is that I've had for most of my life ADHD, which was never diagnosed. And so I tried to do postgraduate. Well, I did. I got a postgraduate, but I never completed my thesis because of that ADHD. So I've become to a whole new understanding of myself as an adult with that. So it's been a real journey.
Oh well, I'm looking forward to when you have doctor at the front of your name and there's something, because you just think about I've got a very a mentor, a close friend of mine who we interviewed recently on the podcast. His name is Tim Metcalf. He's an incredible man. I'm not sure if you've actually met him, Barry, but he's certainly been very active in Aotearoa and social. But he always talks about utility. What's the value? What's the usefulness in this? And I can't think of anybody who's had more of a utilitarian approach to the mahi than yourself, and the impact that it has throughout the country.
Well, I say two things. One is I've been fortunate to be involved in something. I'm just as passionate as I am now than I was 38 years ago. But also it's not been about it's not been about academia. It's always about how would this make a difference? And so I still start every workshop that I do remembering people who have died by suicide, because I say they are the motivation for my work. They're the inspiration, like I keep thinking about, they're the touchstone. How would this make a difference? But most importantly, they are the conscience for my work. They remind me what this mahi is all about and what we need to be doing.
Oh, well, it's inspirational work, Barry. And I just, even as you said it, I thought of people that I've lost as a consequence of it, that propels me to try to promote equity and promote equality. And it's still, and I think often say, Barry, that I think we live in we look back into the 1950s, 60s in America, and the fact that Black people weren't allowed to sit where they wanted to on the bus. I think our viewpoints to do with, especially the rainbow community, I think is
Yeah.
has been deplorable in so many regards, and the additional burden and stress that's placed on people not being their authentic self. We will look back in the same view, I would imagine, as the civil rights movement and think, what on earth were we thinking?
Yeah. Well, I still think Jacinda Ardern says, we just got to be kinder and more compassionate with each other. We've become so mean-spirited in our world, and it's a generosity of spirit that helps people. That's expansive. It helps people to grow. Whereas if we're so mean-spirited, people start to hurt each other.
I strongly support that, and I strongly am very enamoured by the fortune that New Zealand had for having somebody at the helm when she was at the helm.
Yes.
And I think the future will reflect back on that, and it will see if that's there's no doubt.
Yeah.
Barry, a question which I love to ask: if you weren't in the space that you're doing, your work that you're doing now, what other area would you have liked to have been involved, or what would you still like? What would that be?
It's always a hard one to think, but sometimes I think I would like to have been more artistic. I've never seen myself, but I'd love to have been an artisan of some sort. I'm not too sure what, but once again, I believe in that kind of creative forces in people's lives. It opens up things. So yeah, I suppose that would have been my other way of being.
And so you said you haven't got any idea how that would be expressed. Do you have a propensity towards a form of a medium or something that you would be?
Storytelling, it always interests me.
Nice.
And so how we tell our stories, and how conversations inspire other conversations. So when you look at it, like a lot of storytelling was told by men, actually, and so I think it's a wonderful gift when people can tell stories and invite others to tell their stories. Yeah.
And Barry, it is the 101 social work practice that unless you allow someone to tell you a story, you're never going to be able to get to that place of trust and that place where they can be comfortable in that interaction that you have with them.
That's why I've always loved narrative type therapy. I think it's a powerful, powerful way, especially with me.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm grateful. I worked in London for about 10 years, Barry, and I had a lovely manager. Her name was Sylvia. And I remember her saying to me, Scott, always have time for the stories. And I was working with the elderly, and Barry, I felt I would have paid to do the mahi that I was doing. The privilege of being able to sit and listen to so many personal accounts of just life. It was a tremendous privilege, and I'm very grateful that the permission was given, rather than you got to do this assessment, be back in 15 minutes for the next one. It was always your interaction, and you might be the only one that's going to be knocking on this person's door this week or this month or this year. Enjoy your cup of tea, she said.
Well, it's interesting. I think this is a sad indictment. Often when I go around the country, I get picked up at airports by taxi. Say, well, what are you here for? And I share my work. And the number of taxi drivers, like one taxi driver in Whangarei says, he regularly has people who book in, older people, to go for a long, long drive, like pay $100 just to talk to someone. Now, that's just sad. That's a sad indictment in our world. And when we look at, World Health Organization says loneliness is the social pandemic of the 21st century.
That's so true.
Yeah. And it always is, that question is, what's the story behind this person? What if we invited them to tell the story? Like, I think we've got better, like in hospices with storytelling. I think we need to be collecting stories of old people all sorts of ways, intergenerational, getting younger people to collect stories of older people and document them and film them, and very powerful way.
So and otherwise we lose the voice of these, and often it's, you remember this often too late, don't we?
Yes.
That would be thinking, wonder what my great grandfather was like. And then the person that remembers that, you've got to make that phone call and have that conversation with them, beforehand. Whilst I know this, that it's not so much within an academic. I was going to say, Barry, when your natural style when you present, because is very much like a storyteller. You've got that wonderful capacity of going off piste, as it were, and just being able to. And I remember that is what stood out to me, sitting in a lecture theatre. It must have been with about more than 100 people in Rotorua at the time, just absolutely fixed on every word you said at the time. And I remember thinking, there is no question about it. When somebody is in a space where they are incredibly familiar to that the conversation, it's always a delight to listen to that kind of a person. And that is certainly you in that space. Much like Annette Beautray is another person I feel when I've sit and I've seen her. Annette Beautray is another person within New Zealand that works in the same space as Barry, and has come through Wanganui several times, but also speaks with that with authority on the subject too, and is an incredible presenter too. I take my hat off, Anna, to her. But there is that ability that you have to be able to just, that people could fire 1,000 questions off to you, Barry, and if you don't know the answer, you'll be pretty close to knowing the answer. I would have thought, but it's quite a skill, but that storytelling style actually that you have is certainly part and parcel of it. Are there theorists or people that you have admired that kind of have influenced your?
Yeah. Look, the person who I think has written the most powerful book, I'm getting older, I forget names. I haven't even got it with me. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear.
Give me a clue and I'll see if I can.
I can see him. Rory O'Connor, Professor Rory O'Connor. And he wrote a book, If I Should Die, which is a powerful book about why people kill themselves. Rory is a wonderful, compassionate man. And he has he headed up the International Association, and he's really considered the one of the most leading researchers. And his model around suicide is really quite astounding. So I always sort of use that model when I'm teaching. Thomas Joyner is another really influential man. His understanding around, he says there are two motivators for suicide. One is the desire to end your life, and then your capacity or capability to do it. And so he has a model there which I've adapted. But yeah, so they're the two sort of interesting researchers. The work that's been done at Origin on youth suicide at the University of Melbourne, that once again, really exciting work there.
Melbourne seems to produce quite a strong social support, don't they?
Yeah, they have, and they've done some really, really good research through Origin, and which created Headspace and such like in Australia.
Okay, brilliant. What is we talk about those various our own kind of well-being strategies and various things. And what's how do you keep your motivation? And obviously, as you said, it's a passionate subject for you. How do you keep your motivation going and your?
Well, I'm sort of getting towards the end. I'm in my 60s now, but through every day now, I live right beside the sea in Wellington at Worcester Bay. So every day I do some cold water swimming, which is very good for your mood and for your well-being. I'm doing lots of walking. One of my bucket list goals for next year is to walk the El Camino de Santiago right through Spain. So that's what I'm preparing myself for. So having things to look forward to.
What an experience that would be, Barry.
Yes, I'm looking forward to that. Everyone I know who's done it has been a very profound experience. So I'm looking forward to that. So yeah, they're the kind of things that keep me grounded. Good friends. I still love going to movies, the ritual of going to the movies and things like that. So
you
yeah.
go to the Penthouse Theatre in Brooklyn at all, Barry?
I do, but I go more to the Lighthouse in Cuba Street. Yeah, and it has on Wednesdays Seniors Day, and you only have to be 60, so you get a hot drink with your movie for $13.50. It's a bargain.
Great tip. You heard it here first.
Yeah.
There's something about movies, full stop, that can transport us to so many different things.
Oh, absolutely.
I've always been grateful. I've been a part of the Wanganui Film Society for many years. When I was doing some study, I wasn't able to do it. But what was great about it, Barry, is that you didn't quite know what you were going to get each week, but you knew that you were going to get something different. And it was nothing against Hollywood films. There's been some wonderful movies, but being able to go to some both like the German, Italian, and French.
That's right.
They don't care where it ends. They don't necessarily have the beginning, middle, and end, but they can. And you'd be left thinking, I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, no, that's one of the great things is when once again it's about people's storytelling and the way we tell stories. So yeah, I love. It's a great way.
I also think that it's really important that we work to live rather than live to work, as they say.
Exactly. Yeah.
There's so many good movies, so many good books, so many nice meals.
Well, it's interesting with you being in Wanganui. See, I've been doing lots of work up in Wanganui as part of the growing collective well-being, which is the suicide prevention on the strategic leadership group up there. So I'm what's been called their critical friend, but I've had some wonderful trips up there and just some really exciting, inspiring work that's been done through Te Ranganui there and the redesign of the mental health services up there. Very exciting work. So it's a very innovative place up there.
Whitirangi Walsh Tapiat, who's the CEO for Te o Ranganui, she was my lecturer at Massey in the 90s, actually. But she's been incredible in her role. She's a really, very visionary and able to.
Absolutely.
And
I'm always inspired with after a session with them.
Yeah, brilliant, Barry. This is. Thank you so much, Barry, for your time. And Barry, the commonality that we're asking for each person that we get to come on is to tell us about a book that they might have inspired them or that they would recommend to any. And it doesn't have to be work related. It could be anything. And does that provoke something with you?
One book that I found very influential in my life is coming out of that Buddhist psychotherapy type approaches. And one author I always recommend to, some people will not resonate with, is Barry Magid. So Barry Magid. He wrote a book called Ordinary Mind, which is but it's that Charlotte Beck is another writer, but it's that very much grounded in that mindfulness, non-judgmental, just allowing to be. And I've found that kind of pathways really inspiring to help people in their journey. So I always recommend them as authors. So yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you. So Barry Magic, that was the
Magid, Magid. Yep.
Magid, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll put that on our list of things. Right,
Right.
Barry. Please, if you come into Wanganui in the near future, and there's an opportunity for us to have a coffee and a chat down at Mud Ducks down by the Wanganui Awa,
Yep.
which is always a great spot.
Yep.
It would be delightful to have you there. Barry, can you just let what would be, if people are interested in getting connected to TaylorMade training, what would you suggest they go to?
Well, let's go to my website. So it's www, the number 4wellbeing.nz. So www.4wellbeing.nz. And they've got everything there.
Awesome. Well, Barry, once again, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I feel like I'm being able to interact with a real pioneer legend within Aotearoa's space. So thanks once again, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Go well. Thank you so much. Lovely. Take care.
Bye-bye.